What is up, everybody? My name is Bob and welcome back to P.A.W.S. Today we're going to be placing in the last cat for P.A.W.S before we eventually move on to the end tour. This is going to be a bit of a sad one, but here we go. Let's jump on into today's video. That is right, folks of the internet. Welcome back to P.A.W.S with the last cat, the African Leopard. The one that dropped in the most recent anniversary update, and really excited to bring this to you. And I actually use the term last cat with quote air marks because at the time of me recording the voiceover for this video, Frontier obviously done their unlock stream that they usually do at the end of the month and basically said that there's going to be an animal pack next year at some point, but there'll be more details closer to that time. And knowing Frontier, they could well put a cat in there, and because there are a few that are still missing, Serval, Ocelot, that sort of thing, it's still a possibility that there may be something that we can add to P.A.W.S later down the line. But obviously, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. This isn't going to be something I expect to see until at least mid to late March. But regardless of that fact, in the background, we are starting the habitat, and I'm just working on this bit here as you come down from these snow leopards, and I was really trying to get the vista points settled in this one. So as you come down from the snow leopard, I wanted you to be able to have this like through the mesh view, and there's like a rotation line feeder, I think it's called, the tall crane looking one in here that the African leopard would use. But then there's something similar on the other side if you were coming from the Siberian tiger and P.A.W.S cat area, but I'll obviously jump across to that in a moment. I'm just getting the bulk of the terrain work done here more than anything else. So I had loads of ideas for the habitat, but quintessentially a lot of them did get scrapped in the end, unfortunately. I did originally want like a path coming in here where you see the like where the terrain slumped down, and then there'd be like an overhead walking bit, but in the end P.A.W.S decided that it probably wasn't going to work and the spacing was a little bit awkward to do it with, so we end up using this long window that I've used in a couple of habitats now. But you can see here I'm having to like do some adjustments because, you know me, I don't like my flat terrain. So here I am just sort of lining these gutter pieces up with the bottom of the path so that we can get some nice little terrain elevations going in, and there. It just adds a little bit to the whole vibe when you have a little bit of alteration like this. Now this bit on the left here with the shop, this is stuff that you probably haven't seen unless you've been dropping into the live streams, but don't worry, I've still got loads of work to do with P.A.W.S in terms of getting it finished, so don't worry, everything will be shown in its own right when that time comes. But I still need to do the reception area. That's something I've put off pretty much since day one of this whole thing. That's like the last outstanding thing. Chester's the Sandcat's habitat has had a huge rework, so that's something that will be featuring as well in the tour. The shape of the habitat's still the same, but I've just sort of like changed the vibe of it and stuff like that. But yeah, all good things to be tuning in, even if you feel like you've seen every episode of this series. I think there's something that's going to be worth tuning in for the end of tour, just because there'll be little details that haven't been covered in each of these videos and little changes that I've made here and there. And speaking of changes, there are going to be some changes coming to the channel. Obviously, we have pretty much 1 week until Planet Coaster 2 comes out, so there's going to be a change in the content there. I will be touching upon that game, and depending on how much it grabs me, there will be plenty of Planet Coaster 2 content coming to the channel. But also, if you are a sub and you've seen the community post, we have a new zoo starting. As of yet, it has not been given a start date, but it has been given a name, Stafford Zoo. Again, thank you, Sparrow, for the logo for that. And I really want to get you guys involved. It's going to take a bit of a different turn. It's not going to be speed builds like this. I think it's going to be more of like a tour style thing where in my own time, I'll just be like building the zoo. I'll be putting the animals in, doing what I need to do. And then we'll jump in each video and I'll sort of just give you a little bit of a tour of the whole habitat or area that I've worked on, and maybe touch upon any changes and stuff like that. But I just want everyone's feedback involved in that. So if there's certain animals you want to see, it's going to be a world zoo. So I'm not going to be seeing 50 million cats or 50 million ungulates. Don't worry about it. It's going to be a nice mix of everything. But I do want to be I do want to be changing up because I don't want to see another cat for a very long time after this series. And again, touching upon new series, there may be something additional coming to the channel. I'm still working out the kinks and details of it, but yeah, something cool could be coming to the channel, but I'm not going to be saying it too much more than that at this stage. But anyway, this is the second viewing area that I wanted. So as you come down from, you'll see me using, like, again, please use your first person cam in this game, because it helps you get an idea of the viewing if you're trying to get a certain viewpoint in this game. So as you're coming down from the P.A.W.S cat Siberian tiger, I want you to swing around and have this view of the African leopard doing its thing in the habitat. So when I actually come to doing the middle portion of the habitat, in the back there will be like a log that it climbs on, or I've put some enrichment at the front there so that the leopard might come right to the front of the habitat. So just to give guests a really good show as they come around here. But at this point, I'm just trying to hide this lodge in the background so you can see the lodge on the hill. This is going to be our second guest viewing lodge. We've obviously got the first one, that's Koki Lodge, that overlooks the cougar. But this one here is Vihoho Lodge, and this one overlooks the African leopard. So I'm just trying to hit this balance between trying to get it, like, obviously I don't want you to be able to see the people when they're on the balcony, but I've just come to the realization I just can't avoid being able to see people. And when I went back and had a look at Koki Lodge, you can see people on Koki Lodge, but there's just, like, I've tried to obscure the view as much as I possibly can. But I think being able to see the lodge from a guest viewing area as well, it kind of makes you think, do you know what, I didn't realize you could do that. Maybe that's something we can look at doing next time we're here. It's that sense of intrigue that you're giving guests, which I think is really important in terms of just driving people further through the park and even revisiting. But as you can see, like I said in the last video, my style of building and how I build has completely changed now. So obviously built the raised up area on the right hand side and done a little bit to that. Now I've completely switched my focus and I've come across to this area, which is this sort of like secondary viewing area. I've really put the emphasis on getting these viewing areas right the first time, just so that I don't have to come back and change anything at a later date. If I think to myself, if I can get these correct, then I feel like the rest of the habitat will slot into place, and I really feel it did, and I really hope that Najmo is going to be happy here. That's going to be the name of the African leopard in here. It's going to be a single one, and yeah. So we've got these wooden fence pieces coming back in again. These are on the workshop. My workshop link I'll put in the description. I need to remember to make a collection of all of the blueprints that I've used for this place, from not just myself, but the 4 blueprints that I've used from other people as well, just so that everyone's got access to it. I'm going to try and figure out how I can do the store, like the workshop page, because I want to obviously have it so that you can access all of the user media that I'm using as well if you do want to tour this, so that you've got access to the screens, all of the, there's even like music that I've got in the game now. Well, not music per se, but some background sounds that I've used, so you can be able to transport those into your game as well, just to get the same ambience that I do. And after I finished messing around with the window, I carry on working on this other side here. So I kind of like the idea of there being this like trench type thing, just to encourage the African leopard to climb across. So I end up putting like one of the, I actually found a nice in-game blueprint for climbing that I could use for the African leopard, so I end up using that here. I put like the pumpkin feeder thing on it as well, but it's just going to be a lot of rocks here just to prevent them from walking down here and instigate them to use the climbing a lot more, and hopefully get a lot more cool shots of the African leopard. I mean, I did a few bits when I was looking around the habitat after I put it in, and it was using it exactly how I wanted it to. So yeah, I think the thought process has really paid off here, and it's worked in practice. But once all the rock work is done, you know what it comes next. It's going to be our buffalo grass, and just the same premise as I've always done. So sink it into the ground close to the edges of the rock work, or close to the window here, and then the further back in the habitat we go, the more we let it show through. And yeah, I've really started to love using the green grass as like a mix in with this as well now. So I think before it was looking a little bit monotone, but obviously where I was using things like creosote bushes, saltworts, even in this one, I think I've got some of those, I can't remember what they're called now, but like the white-tipped bushes, the big white-tipped bushes, they even make an appearance in here. So I think you do get like nice pops and everything does not look as monotone, but I think the longer bits of drin grass sort of remind me of what we in the UK would call, I think it's called like crabgrass, which is just these like dark, long patches of grass that you'd normally find in a field somewhere. So like I say, I could be wrong on the name there, but I don't know how they form or why they form, but they are just something that I've seen quite a fair bit in the UK here. And this is that climbing frame that I was talking about. It's really fits strangely well. So I thought, you know what, I was going to make my own like just climbing piece, but then I thought to myself, actually, I kind of like this. Like I say, I don't really seem to use the in-game ones all that much. Well, I say this actually, I do use the in-game ones quite a lot because I feel like they're the only ones that enable for proper and correct climbing of animals in this game. If you try and build your own, it feels like that they just look horrific and they just don't use it however you want to. So I really do try and use the in-game ones as much as I can when it comes to climbing structures. But here I'm just going through and adding a bit of like theming foliage. So I've gone through and put the correct filter on for the African leopard and just trying to get as much of that theming done as possible. So as much as this is set in the UK, I do want it to have like a few trees here and there that would be indigenous to its native habitat. And you're probably wondering why I'm going a bit heavy on the foliage in this, because obviously if it's an African leopard, you would expect it to be living in quite an arid climate with not a lot of foliage. But the realistic thing is, and I didn't actually realize this until I stumbled across a book that someone bought me for Christmas a few years ago, is that African leopards actually have two coat variations in terms of the density of the rosettes on their fur. So those that live in a more drier, arid climate with not as much foliage, the rosette density is a lot less. The one we have in game looks more in keeping with a forest variant, so a lot more rosettes allow it to camouflage in with its environment a lot more. And those that don't know is that African leopards actually like to pull their prey when they kill it up into trees. So in some places that they will have these, I mean, they look comical, but obviously there is like a real threat there. They'll have these signs that say danger of falling prey, and it will have a picture of like a gazelle falling from a tree. But this is something that realistically does happen in these parts of the world, where they pull these animals up into the trees to keep them away from other predators. There is always the risk that gravity can kick in and that gazelle will come crashing back down to earth, potentially on someone. So you sort of double look at the sign originally when you first see it in a screenshot, but then you soon realize that there is actually a genuine threat there. But back on the topic of foliage, the African set of foliage in this game really has come leaps and bounds since the game first came out. Obviously, we've got these mapingo peas, marula trees, both absolutely outstanding textures on these trees. Like, I really love them. So here you can see, probably not all that well, but in the middle of the path here, we've actually got like a small planter with a mapingo tree growing out of it, just because it helps set the theming of the area around this habitat as well, so that when you're in the area you don't see the trees when you're looking through, you're actually standing in amongst them. It's something that I kind of think I'm going to go back and do with the snow leopard habitat as well. I think I'm going to go and grab some pines and put them outside of the snow leopard house, just so that you have a transition when you're going into that area as well. But I'm trying something a little bit different here as well with some of the rock work. So I'm just getting some rocks and making these like piles as well that are quite tall, just to give a bit more cover for the African leopard. I don't want it to be, I feel like sometimes some of these habitats are a bit too open and you can see the animals from anywhere, but at the same time I feel like that's kind of a cool thing, you know, because I feel like a lot of time when you go to zoos or sanctuaries like this, you don't always get to see the animal you want to see, because they'll either have an indoor area or they'll be hiding somewhere higher up, whereas you'll be lower down and stuff like that. So I understand from a realistic standpoint that the animals might not always be visible, but at the same time, I think when you're walking around and you're trying to educate people on these animals, it's a lot easier to educate people on them when you can actually see them and point out the things that you're trying to explain to guests. Now, once all of that front foliage work is done, I go through and I place all of the enrichment items I want in this habitat. So at the guest lodge viewing area, we've got like the scratching post. I then go and place the rubber hose ball here at the front of the habitat just to encourage them down to the front of the glass. The pumpkin blood feeder is going to sit on that climbing frame there, and then I grab the rotation line feeder and put that on top of this this little mound area here. And then the water I end up putting inside the what is going to be their indoor area. So at the moment you can't see it because I've not placed it down, but I end up taking the indoor area from the lynx habitat, adjusting the size of the entranceway for that, and then the water goes in there just to encourage the leopard in there as well. But here I then start working on the rear of the habitat. Again, I want to limit the use of these retaining walls as much as they are probably quite realistic to use. I do think that they're a little bit unsightly, but this bit here you see where I'm placing down the mesh fence, this changes dramatically because I was building this habitat and then I sort of came to the realization, hang on, the keepers don't have anywhere to be able to get into the habitat, so this ends up changing quite a bit in the end. But it does mean as well that this bit behind where I've got this big grey pit that I was going to turn into a mine or a quarry, that's not going to be a quarry anymore. I've decided against that, so that ends up just getting changed just so that I can then extend this bit out a little bit and have a little bit of a staff plot area before they go into the African leopard habitat. But that gap at the back is where I end up placing the lynx habitat. Now, something I don't talk about too much, and I feel like I potentially should because I think it does go under the radar a lot of the time, is you see me, I'm placing some trees here in the background. So we've got this, I think this is a mangrove tree, this one here, and then we've got this mapingo tree that I place in. But shadows in this game really help sell a realistic look if that is what you're going for. There's something about standing in a certain place and that the shadows from these trees are like the way that they cast the shadows are so nice. But at the same time, you have to be careful. So you see at the front here, I've got this area where I want the African leopard to come down to. I keep putting trees down, but they're blocking the light. So you wouldn't actually be able to see the African leopard. So I end up not having a tree on that right side because I have my game set to 2 o'clock all the time, just so that it has a certain way of looking with the light. So you can by all means obviously play this map at a different time of day, but it really is kind of made to be played at 2 o'clock in the afternoon because I think that's when the lighting looks best. So I go and grab my climb proof things here. These are made just using those like small metal mesh pieces in the circle and then just like tilting them upwards. So I go around and place all these just to stop the African leopards from climbing up the trees. Obviously this is something they would do in real life, but I really want to be using the climbing structures as opposed to the climbing of the trees. So yeah, and then I go and grab my one here from the P.A.W.S leopard habitat because I know this works quite well when they're crossing the river. So I end up using this, grabbing it, just rejigging the pieces around a little bit so that they suit this terrain as opposed to the terrain of the P.A.W.S leopard habitat. But I'm really glad I placed this in because some of the views that you get when they're using this beam in particular when you're walking from the Pallas cat Siberian tiger side, really nice. I really do like it. I think it's such a nice introduction to the habitat before you've even reached it to the viewing glass of it. Now I didn't show me putting it in, but we've obviously placed the shelter in for the African leopard now. Again, it's just a copy of the one that we used for the Eurasian lynx, but the premise is still the same as all the others. So I end up going and grabbing these decal pieces just to help blend the sand terrain in with the concrete, because how the terrain sort of just ends abruptly I really don't like. So we end up using some decal pieces here just to help with the whole mix of things as well. And again, you may look at the entranceway and think, wow, that's actually incredibly small. How do they make its way through that? Planet Zoo Plus, like I say, I have been converted over to Planet Zoo Plus now just because I prefer these smaller, realistic looking entranceways as opposed to the huge, monstrous ones that we had to tolerate with for the tiger for the longest time. And then after we did that, it was at that point that I realized that I'd made a blunder and that I needed somewhere for the keepers to be able to actually get into the habitat and place the animal in the habitat. So up here where the Holer's Lodge is, we sort of just get rid of a little bit of the foliage on the left here and just extend it out a little bit just to give the keepers somewhere to be able to get up to. And then I just keep using my mesh fence and just extend this area out a little bit just so that they've got like a little bit of a concrete area to like do some things. We'll put like some more decorations in here off recording, but it'll be like the usual stuff, things like wheelbarrows and some buckets for feeding and whatnot. But this isn't going to be an area that guests are going to be able to get up to, so this isn't going to be one of like the interactive areas. This is going to be purely for staff use only. Apart from those people that are obviously staying in Vihoho Lodge, they'll be the ones that are going to be allowed up here in the end. And then we go around and sort of just tie it all in together. So this pathing here gets put in, but then I end up using concrete panels just to pave over this whole area, just to make it look a little bit more in keeping as well. So here I'm just like blending it in with the edge, but then I use the panels just to cover the whole thing area over so that you can't see the path underneath. But that way I can turn it into a staff path and not have to worry about guests randomly wandering up here, because I do hope that they change it for a potential Planet Zoo 2, that guest pathing and staff pathing are not separate entities, but rather something that you could toggle on and off so that guests just don't use them, but you don't have to have the ugly red, blue, green path with the Planet Zoo logo on. But once this is done, the habitat is pretty much complete. I may redo this top bit at the end, but again, that's something we'll have to see between now and the tour dropping. Thank you so much for watching this video. It has been a pleasure to build for. At the end, we're going to have some cinematics and the African leopard using this habitat. But again, I hope you've enjoyed, and I look forward to seeing you all for the final tour in the next week or so. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.